recording. So this, sorry. So this came about, I posed a question on Facebook one night, and I asked individuals, I said, hey ladies, how are you all doing out there with perimenopause? And the response I got, I was like, wow, so it's not only me that's going through it. Like, it's not just you, but sometimes you feel like you're the only one going through something. And so just to see that response, that's what kind of came to me like, hey, why don't we do a webinar on that and talk through that a little bit more? Because people may have questions and they can get real-time answers. So again, if this is whether you're in the early stages of perimenopause, well into menopause, or you're supporting someone that's in that space, this is for you. Tonight, I'm honored to be joined by our incredible guest speaker, Dr. Ayana Herbert. Dr. Herbert is a board-certified emergency medicine physician with over 2 decades of experience caring for patients at life's most critical moments. A graduate of Spelman College, AUC, and the Drew UCLA School of Medicine. She spent much of her career on the front lines of emergency care, witnessing how preventable conditions too often lead to devastating outcomes, particularly in Black communities. The loss of her mother to breast cancer at the age of 30 shaped Dr. Herbert's, I'm hearing some feedback, shaped Dr. Herbert's perspective and deepened her commitment to women's health. She became a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine and completed executive education in nutrition through Harvard to better understand the role of prevention and empowerment in long-term wellness. She furthered her knowledge with certifications and education in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And she is the member of the Menopause Society, formerly NAMS. And Dr. Herbert is the founder of Path Health, a boutique cash-based practice specializing in medical weight loss, bioidentity hormone replacement therapy, and lifestyle medicine for women in midlife. Her work is inclusive and compassionate, with a particular focus on creating a safe and affirming space for Black women who are often overlooked, yes, dismissed, or underserved in the healthcare system. Very true statement. Through her practice, public speaking, and educational outreach, Dr. Herbert is on a mission to challenge misinformation, especially around hormone therapy, reduce shame when it comes to medical weight loss, and help women make informed, confident decisions about their health. She blends science, strategy, and sisterhood to help women feel like themselves again and keep it that way. She brings years of expertise, compassion, and clarity to this topic. She'll be breaking down the medical side of perimenopause and menopause and what's happening in our bodies, how to manage our symptoms, treatment options, and what it really means to thrive through this phase. Dr. Herbert, thank you so very much for joining us this evening again. I will definitely turn this presentation over to you now so that you can share with the ladies on the call. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to make sure everyone that can hear me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get into this presentation. And let me just work on that 1 second. All right, so here we are. So here we are with this talk, the power through the pause, thriving through perimenopause and menopause. So she just gave a beautiful introduction. So you'll see more of a summary of that right here. And let me just try to minimize so I can see my whole screen. There we go. All right, so as she stated, I am a board certified physician, frontline as an emergency room physician. I made what I feel is a very courageous pivot at this stage in my career to get on what I call the well side of care and align with my personal values in wellness as well as in lifestyle medicine. I founded Path Health here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Buckhead area with this dedication to apply what I've learned, again, personally and professionally, to serve women. I also will see men, but my focus and what gets me out of bed every day to do this is the commitment I have to women, especially women who look like me. Yep, trying to move this. All right. So we'll start with a quote. I like to open up talks with quotes. Words We Live by the famous poet Maya Angelou. Phenomenal woman, that's me. And I believe that's who I'm talking to today on this call. When I think about the circle that came to this call, why you saw it, whether you saw it through my post or through Ayesha's post, this is why you're here. And so I like to give credit and think about who is in this room in the Zoom call with me. I believe I'm talking to leaders. I believe I'm talking to innovators, executives, trailblazers, entrepreneurs, waymakers. And with that, there's characteristics that come with us as women. We're educated, we're thriving, we're successful, we're empowered. Sisterhood keeps us connected and supported. And this is something that is going to come into play as we get into this talk, because though we can be all of those things, we can still be left behind in this conversation. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the nitty gritty. As we stated, this is usually what we call like a crash course, if you will, when we talk about hormone balance, hormone background. So you want to get a pen and paper again. It's a little mini course in learning about this. And just keep in mind that things with hormones, when we talk about perimenopause and menopause, this can start as early as our mid-30s. So when we talk about education, the earlier that we know that something could be going on with our bodies, that's why it's important. And I recently held something at my practice called Mothers and Daughters, because we're in this generation, if we're not 30s and 40s or 50s, well, we didn't learn these things from our moms. And I want you guys to go ahead and jump in the chat. Tell me what you learned from your mother about perimenopause or menopause. Go ahead and just drop that in the chat, even if the word is nothing. I want to know, what did we learn? And if the word is nothing, that's
The first word was nothing.
why.
Thank you.
That's pretty much what I expect, is that word.
Dr. Wilburn, thank you.
Yeah.
Mostly everybody's saying nothing. Yeah.
And so that's why this crash course is going to be so important, because even this little bit of information is going to get you a lot further than our parents. You got to think about that. Our mothers probably unnecessarily may have suffered in silence, and we know that too. All right. So let's talk about the three main players when it comes to our hormones. So the three major players are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And there's a bonus one, and then if anyone can guess it, we're not going to get into it too much today, but try to take a guess for me, and you can throw that into the chat as well. What are some of the guesses out there? And Ayesha, you can let me know, because I can't directly see the.
Yes, I will. No one's responded yet.
Okay.
I will say though, when you asked about what did your mother tell you, we had, I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this right, Dr. Wilburn. She said, I'm telling my 15-year-old everything. Tiffany said, all I remember is that she has had terrible mood swings. Yep. Latanya says she told me hot flashes were brutal. I know exactly what she's talking about now. Okay, so when you asked about understanding hormones, Shonda said cortisol.
Cortisol, that's a good guess. That's a good guess. The little extra one, like I said, we're not going to get into it, that can play all this, because we are a whole system. We are a whole body. We're not broken up into little pieces. It's thyroid. That's the one that sometimes can play a role in a lot of these symptoms. All right, so let's talk about these one by one. All right, so first we have estrogen. So primarily, estrogen is made in the ovaries. It's the master regulator of the female body. It supports brain function, bone density, heart health, skin elasticity, and the reproductive tissues. And it's what keeps us sharp, resilient, and metabolically protected. So again, just going over these bullet points, again, it supports brain function, our cognitive health. Keep that in mind when we talk about some of the benefits of replacement. Maintains bone density, reduces fracture risk. We have to understand what a fracture can do to us when we get older. Promotes heart health, vascular function, enhances skin elasticity and hydration, to the point that this is often sometimes even in face creams. Vital for our reproductive tissue health. And we'll get into that when we talk about the genital urinary syndrome of menopause. And then again, metabolic protected and resilient. Oftentimes, when we start losing our estrogen, we start noticing things in our body changing, such as all of a sudden we have high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol, insulin resistant that we didn't have before. The next on these major three players is progesterone. So progesterone is produced after ovulation by the ovaries as well. It's the body's natural calming agent. It supports sleep, mood stability, protection against estrogen dominance. And that's going to be another, I'm saying when you take notes, that's going to be key when we understand why this is used in hormone replacement therapy. And it prepares the body for rest and balance, both monthly and long term. And so again, just going back through the bullet points, body's natural calming hormone. We're thinking about anxiety, things like that, keeping us in balance. Deep, restful sleep. Sleep is so important. We underestimate it. Sometimes we normalize, not resting. So promotes mood stability, emotional regulation. The balance that we talk about is that if for any reason you're estrogen dominant or on estrogen as a replacement, if you're dominant, that can lead to risk of things like endometrial cancer if it's unopposed by progesterone. And again, just rest, recovery, hormonal harmony, just overall. And the third of our big players is testosterone. Now, I want to say that testosterone is not a male hormone. A lot of times it gets misclassified as it's for men or it only needs to be addressed in men. And I just want to come here to say that is not true. We actually have more testosterone in our body than we have estrogen. It's just the way that our bodies utilize this. And so it is also produced in the ovaries as well as in our adrenal glands. It fuels energy, motivation, mental clarity, confidence, muscle mass, a key role in libido and our sexual health. And again, it's often overlooked in women, but it's essential for our physical strength, our drive, and our overall vitality. So what happens when these hormones start to decline with time? So I'm going to go over some of the symptoms, and a lot of these we're familiar with, such as the hot flashes, night sweats. I had a meeting, it was women from 33 to 59, and I said, what are the symptoms you're aware of? And most people only knew about hot flashes and night sweats. They did not identify a lot of other things that you'd be experiencing with perimenopause and or menopause. So hot flashes and night sweats, about 70 to 80% of women will experience hot flashes and night sweats. That's considered the vasomotor symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. And sometimes what goes along with that might be things like palpitations as well. Insomnia, weight gain. You can go ahead and just put a hands up or anything in the comments if weight gain has been something that you experience. A lot of women will say that fat starts to redistribute to their bellies. People call it menobelly. And even if you're doing all the same things that you used to do, something just isn't right. Anxiety, depression. A lot of times in our 40s, it's the first time that you may be seeking help from a psychiatrist because now you're dealing with anxiety, depression, you're crying, you're sad, and now you're getting put on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medicines, in response to this. And here are some more. Brain fog. Go ahead and put a hand up in the chat if brain fog, we get those examples, right? You walk into the room, you can't even remember, or a name can't come to the tip of your tongue. And I guess if you're saying like you talk to career women a lot, think of what that can do to your confidence, right? When you're in meetings and things like that, and you're just not as sharp as you always knew yourself to be in certain situations. So, that can definitely be a thing. Irritability, people just getting on your nerves, right? Your spouse, your partner, your kids, you're snapping at people, but there's a part of you that says, that's not me, right? You're able to recognize that that's not how you normally are. You are not yourself. Mood swings, fatigue, low libido, We start to see irregular cycles as well in this time period due to the fluctuations in hormones. And really, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Research has identified over 50 attributable symptoms that we can attribute to hormone fluctuations. And I just want to say, if you guys can start putting in the chat, if you have experienced any of these symptoms, just put one or two in the chat. Tell us if you are in this stage, and we'll define it a little further in just a few minutes, any of these that you have personally experienced and didn't really know what to attribute it to.
Do you want me to go over them now or just wait?
Yeah, go ahead. What you see in the
Okay.
label? Tell us.
Yep. They are definitely putting them in the chat. Vaginal dryness, skin and hair changes, body odor changes, headaches, weight gain, hair thinning, heart palpitations. Dr. Wilburn said her husband passed away in December, so these symptoms are exacerbated. Yes, I can understand. Night sweats, fatigue, brain fog. Mercedes said all of them. Sherry said, dang, it seems like I've experienced all of the symptoms. Vivian said hot flashes, red palms of her hands, and brain fog. Latanya, brain fog, irritability, yep, anxiety, insomnia, facial hair, brain fog again, weight gain, hot flashes, all the above. Rhonda said, brain fog, definitely Patrice. And Tiffany said, I need stock in 3M as I have sticky notes, sticky notes. I have sticky notes everywhere. Liz to help me remember. Yes, Tiffany, I have stuff in my phone.
Little notebooks and stuff. Write everything down because you used to be able to recall, and those days behind us, right?
Yes. Yep. Night sweats. Yeah. So kind of everything you're saying. Really quickly, Dr. Herbert, I want to touch on what Dr. Wilburn said about her husband passing and like how it kind of exasperated what she feels like are the symptoms that you described, right? And I think one of them that stuck out for me is depression. And I just had this conversation with my sister because almost 10 years ago, my dad passed, our dad passed. And, you know, I was experiencing depression. And as we were talking about it today, she said, you know what, you could have been already experiencing that and going through perimenopause. And like she said, Dr. Wilburn said, it just exasperated it, right? And so I just kind of wanted to, you know, bring attention to that because yes, that is something where people sometimes don't discuss that as much, the depression piece of it.
Yeah, and other mental health, we'll get into in a second, can be either uncovered or heightened in this time period as well. But what I want our audience to pay attention to is how many women responded in that chat. Because one thing as we go through this is us to really understand that we are not alone in experiencing these symptoms, but also at the same time that we all are individuals and very unique when we talk about our symptoms. What you have may not be what another person's experiencing. So you might have saw someone put something in that chat, you're like, oh, you can have that too, right? And that's why your care needs to be personalized. There, even though it may seem like, okay, you just, you know, get these hormones back, but it's still very personalized. What works for someone may not work for you and vice versa. So always keep that in mind as we're moving forward. So one other thing I want to say about symptoms, because they're all over the place and our healthcare system is so truncated, you can think that if you have palpitations, you're at a cardiologist's office. If you're having a fatigue, now you're with the endocrinologist. Urinary symptoms, you may be going to a urologist and you're getting this, I call it prescription for every affliction, when sometimes it all may just be perimenopause. And it's not that those things don't need to be excluded, but I'm just saying in consideration of it all, like sometimes it is just this, and getting back on your hormones can solve a lot of problems. So let's go ahead and keep moving forward. All right, so I want to make very clear what the definitions of perimenopause and menopause actually are. So perimenopause, I'm just going to read from the slide, is a transition phase before menopause when your hormones start to fluctuate, periods become irregular. As I stated earlier, it can begin in your late 30s, early 40s, and often brings the symptoms that we just discussed. Menopause is a single day in time. I call it day 366. All right. It's when you've gone 12 consecutive months without a period, marking the end of your reproductive years. And this usually on average happens around age 51. and can come with ongoing hormonal changes and symptoms. Now, I'm going to interject a little bit on here. Some of us, myself included, have had hysterectomies. So you're not able to say, I haven't had a cycle for 12 months. Someone may have what's called surgical or induced menopause, such as going through chemotherapy for a cancer, or if a hysterectomy was kind of what we call like a total hysterectomy where you had your ovaries removed, that's instant menopause, right? Because now your ovaries are no longer present. So that would kind of go back into the definition of menopause without having that gauge of cycles stopping or becoming irregular, and oftentimes needs to be confirmed with lab testing. And so I'm going to put a picture to it. Here's a visual of what's happening with our hormones during these stages. So in premenopause, you can see there's some predictability there. And this is our reproductive years, unless there's another clinical reason why you may have irregular periods or you're on birth control. This is what's going on with our cycle. Pretty predictable, right? Up and down we go, up and down we go. When we get into perimenopause, you see what we call as chaos. Highs, lows, a lot of irregularity, very unpredictable, very different for every individual. And then we get to postmenopause and everything just flatlines. Okay, just straight across. I like to do a little, the little noise when you get the flat line. And this is what's happening with our cycles in these different phases. So again, when we're talking about perimenopause, things are all over the place. And we get into postmenopause, you see this line here, your progesterone is at its low. You see this estrogen is pretty much next to nothing. And these other lines are the signals that are trying to tell the ovaries to release something. And the reason why they get higher and higher is because the signaling that goes from the brain to the gonads or your ovaries goes round and round to it's like, all right, forget it. They're not giving us any more estrogen. All right. So, and another important thing to know, since we're talking about all three hormones today, estrogen, progesterone, as well as testosterone, is to understand that testosterone actually has a natural decline in all of us just as we age. So this is more a factor of age. So even though testosterone is produced in our ovaries as well as our adrenals, there is a natural decline. So take a look at the 20s and 30s, nice and riding high at the top of this mountain. And then off the cliff we go, okay? So if we're talking about our 40s and 50s, we're less than half of the amount of testosterone from the time that we were at a peak of its benefits, okay? So again, just a visual of kind of where we are, how much we decline. We're in this age of most likely the audience that I'm speaking to today. So let's talk about it. All right, we're going to open this up a little bit. Like I said, as professional women, as mothers, as daughters, I want to know how do you feel any of these symptoms can affect your daily life, your career life? Anyone want to give an example of how these symptoms can affect your life? You can again talk in the chat, or I don't know how many of us is if you want someone to come off mute. Ayesha, you can go ahead and direct that.
Yeah, either way. So definitely feel free to take yourself off of mute and ask your question, or if you feel more comfortable, put it in the chat. Stephanie Wynn. Yes, ma'am. Hey, Stephanie.
Hey, Aisha. Hi. Thank you for the question. So I have a question about these symptoms. So in 2017, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And so it pushed me into something perio, during, and then after, like post, because I stopped having a cycle, but I'm still having these symptoms. Like all of the symptoms that were on the screen, I was like, oh my goodness, I was over here like, this is it. This is everything. And so now it subsided, but it just affected the way I was able to like go and like like interact with family, friends. And so some of it just had me like just where I just didn't want to go anywhere. So I would just stay home. So on top of, dealing with the autoimmune condition of Crohn's disease. So um all of those symptoms, the fatigue, the brain fog, the night sweats, and um, I thought it was just at one point it was happening so much I was like, oh, this is just normal. And I thought I was having fevers, so I was calling my doctor, hey, I'm having this really high fever, but it would be really hot, and then I get cold. And then it was like all night, like my bed would be like I would be drenched, like I've been outside just sweating. And so then I started like sleeping with less clothes on. It get better, but then I'm still sweating. So yes, this is all of it has affected me, but I don't let it get me down. I just keep going. But I have found that what I'm eating, my diet, and like going to like getting fresh air, like not just being solely in soul solitude has helped me as well. So definitely those symptoms definitely I could relate to.
Thank you for sharing, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Dr. Wilburn.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this session and for allowing this topic to be discussed. It's so important. I think for me, the biggest thing has been anxiety. I do have the brain fog, and I think I'm just entering the peri part of it. Um, but for me, it really is the anxiety. I travel quite a bit for work, and for the first time, and I've traveled all over the world lots of times, but the first time about a month or so ago, I actually had an anxiety attack on the plane. And this is before I really identified, and I haven't met it. Like I'm going to my primary care provider in a month or so, so I'll know for sure. But I didn't really identify it with perimenopause. I thought it was because of my husband's passing, but it just kept getting worse. So I had the panic attack, and I really had to just kind of sit there and breathe and all of that. And then also just driving. So there have been times when I've been driving and just in anxiety, it just feels like something drops. I don't know how to explain it. Something inside it just dropped, and I just had all of these racing thoughts about what could happen and all of that. And so as I've been doing my research, learning that anxiety is part of it actually has been helpful to me because it's given me hope to know that there's potential help.
Absolutely. I think you described quite a few. Definitely Stephanie said she had all the above. Um, and I think you said as well, especially with the anxiety piece, I can definitely understand that as well. Stephanie, you said something too when you said there were times where you didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like you were in solitude, where you didn't necessarily want to be around others. Um,
Yes.
and it's just when I heard that I was like, okay, once again, it's not just me, because I definitely have those moments myself. So it's kind of good to know, not good that people are going through it, but again, you're not the only one that's dealing with it, but to get the help and have the questions answered tonight. So I want to read Dr. Herbert. I think she had dropped off. I want to see if she's back on. I want to read some of the comments that you all put in the comment section. Tiffany, you said, well, today you cried at your desk from frustration and anger out of nowhere. That's interesting because I had a friend just share that with me as well, that they did the same exact thing like a week or so ago. So Tiffany, do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like did you have to step away for a second? Like,
Oh, yes, of course. It's just, I don't know. We as women take a lot of burden on our shoulders.
mm-hmm,
And I think we tend to take on things as to not get blamed for things not going right.
mm-hmm,
And you know that you're working hard. You know that you're probably putting in more than the average as a mom, as a employee, as a manager, as this, as that, as a sorority member. It just keeps piling on and on and
mm-hmm.
on. And then, one day you're sitting at your desk and you realize, like, why am I doing all this? What
Yep.
is it all for? Is this
Mm-hmm,
really what I'm supposed to be doing? It is the stress of it all. And when you really sit down and think about it, just like this lady right here is grabbing her head, the realization of all of that is
Yeah.
just a slow release of a cry. Then I'm angry
Mm-hmm.
because now I'm crying for something I probably put my own self in. And it starts a hormonal rage. And then I just get up and walk away. So there you have it. That's really what it's all about.
And once again, can relate. You know, thank you so much for being transparent and sharing that with us. Because I guarantee there's others on the call that are probably shaking their head as well, and can relate to that too. Mercedes, you had your hand up next.
I did.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
it makes me feel a lot better about the anxiety because I used to drive everywhere and I have gotten to the point where I can't drive on the highway. It's like I'm thinking about what's on the other side if I go over the cliff. So when I have to go on a long distance, I like Perimeter Mile, but I make my husband drive me up there. And I didn't realize why I was getting anxiety about driving because it came all of a sudden. Because as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I had my partial hysterectomy, I went right into menopause. So I started
Mm.
hot flashes. And when I think about some of the things that the lady said, my mom passed from Alzheimer's. And I think that a lot of it was depression and a lot of it could have been menopause and her not knowing how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Let me just interject. Because when you just talked about perimeter, driving the perimeter, let me tell you something. All of us probably get anxiety driving the perimeter mall right now, especially if you're coming from the west side. That interchange is wild. So um, let me see. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much, Mercedes. Latanya, you had your hand up next. Latanya, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay.
And if you
Mhm.
can, I did get dropped off. That was
Yes, no, yeah, I realized that you had dropped off and I was
yeah,
like, wait.
to these, I was able to catch some of these, and that's why this question is so important because, we don't want to normalize, right?
Mhm.
These symptoms. I think that's a big thing. And again, I'm sorry that I missed some of the, what everyone was sharing, but, you pack it in, we internalize it, we normalize it, and just keep pushing through. And that's what we have to decide that we don't need to do anymore, right? When it comes to, our hormonal health. So that's just something that I wanted, to be able to say. And as well, like I said, and what people have been sharing, the way it could affect your personal life, your family life, your career life, even in the professional, it could affect your personal image, your self-confidence. You can start having difficulty with certain tasks, right? You might look at reducing your hours in a career setting, bypassing promotions because it's just too much, right? And these are just small things that, can be affected. And, and like I said, in the career life, we talked about the mental health component with anxiety, with depression. I heard some of that coming in. And again, I do apologize for the drop off. And so those are just, like I said, some of the things that we wanted to talk about on that slide. So we get into the question now of, let me move into the next slide. Like, what can we do about it? Like, what are the next steps when we talk about medical guidance? And so I want to get into that as well. So what can you do? So talk to a doctor that understands. And why do I need to qualify this statement with saying, talk to a doctor that understands? We would almost try to think that this is a given, right? Doctors went to medical school, especially our OBs and our gynecologists. There are women health advocates. Shouldn't they know? And I don't know how much experience our audience today has, but do you feel like sometimes in the medical system, you're running into walls when it comes to bringing these things up with your doctors? And I'll probably try to go ahead and explain a little bit more of why that is. One of the reasons why I can qualify that and say a reason why a doctor may not understand is because back in 2002, there was a study, and just to parallel it even with my career, in 2002, I was entering my second year residency. And so I'm a young doctor. I'm being taught by obviously senior attendings and senior physicians. And the study comes out that almost completely shut down hormone replacement therapy as an option because the misinformation and the conclusions that came out of that study were that hormones, blanketed statement, cause cancer, right? And so, millions of women just overnight stopped taking hormones, called into their doctors, stopped my prescription. And for the past 20 plus years, we have this huge gap based on misinterpreted data and misinformation and just plain fear. So what happens at that point in 2002? Nobody's teaching me, and trust, no one's teaching your other doctors either. They're not teaching your OBGYN, they're not teaching your endocrinologist. No one is learning about this. So in this day and age, in 2025, why I can go from emergency room to this, because you have to make it a commitment and take the initiative to choose to learn this information in order to be in the position to be a resource. And so that's what I mean by a doctor understands, not only understands, but who has the time to listen. Because even in the conversations we've expressed and the things that you guys have shared with me tonight, it's very nuanced, right? It's not gonna, that 15-minute annual visit is not gonna get it, right? So that's just something to take into consideration in order to be in the position to consider bioidentical hormone replacement therapy as well as lifestyle optimization. So let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, so bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. So when we talk about that, it's the 3 hormones that we discussed earlier, plus, like I said, sometimes with a sprinkle of thyroid support as well. So we're talking about the replacement of estrogen, the replacement of progesterone, as well as when indicated the replacement of testosterone. In addition to alleviating symptoms, what a lot of the studies have shown that it's actually protective in the long term, improving bone health. And we talk about that for decreasing the risk of osteoporosis, hip fractures. That's a huge one. And I say that because and when I'm in the ER, this is what I'm diagnosing. And so you have to understand what that driver is. If a woman, an older woman, breaks her hip, she's automatically fast forwarding the date to her passing. It causes almost an immediate decline because you cannot recover from that. Now your way of life is different. Your independence can be affected. Like, that's a real big thing. It can happen off of something like a fluke. Personal story for me was my great grandmother. She got like robbed, like someone snatched her purse, causing her to fall and break her hip. And even though she was older, 90, she was independent at that time. But once that hip was broken, that was it. And it led to her decline. The other protective measures are cardiovascular protection, decreased risk of the number 1 cause of death for women is cardiovascular. It's not cancer, it's cardiovascular disease. And so hormone replacement therapy has been shown to decrease this risk. Another big one I heard someone bring up, dementia. Cognitive protection is another one where there's also studies that are showing that decreased risk of development of Alzheimer's dementia with hormone replacement therapy. Like I said, if it is definitely appropriate. So the currently approved indications for hormone replacement therapies, and so when we talk about approval, we're talking about like FDA approved, is the vasomotor symptoms. So we talked about that. That's the hot flashes, that's the night sweats, that's maybe the heart palpitations. The genitourinary syndrome of menopause recently just got some good approvals, but that's when we talk about things like recurrent urinary tract infections, painful intercourse, vaginal dryness, all those type of things that can affect your genitourinary area. Prevention of osteoporosis, not treatment, but it's indicated for the prevention of. The problem with this, though, is a lot of times our healthcare system doesn't ask that you even screen for the health of your bones until you're 65 plus. This is something that we should be looking at now. And the other things that help that is building muscle strength, and those are other things we'll talk about. And the last one is low libido, also known as the hyperactive sexual desire disorder. And that's going to come into play when we talk about testosterone as a modality in hormone replacement. And there are a few contraindications, and you see that I put an asterisk by that because in the end, everyone is an individual. And you have to be able to understand the risk versus benefits of any medication that you choose to start in conversation and informed education with your provider or physician. So for sure, I can say that estrogen sensitive cancers such as estrogen sensitive breast cancer will be a contraindication, as well as other estrogen sensitive cancers such as uterine cancer, some certain ovarian cancers would be a contraindication. Unexplained vaginal bleeding would be another one that will need to be worked up with ultrasound, oftentimes endometrial biopsies, ablation, and different things like that. Blood clots, so deep vein thrombosis or DVT or pulmonary embolism. Again, I would put an asterisk there. That is not, in my opinion, a absolute contraindication. Oftentimes it's type of way that someone might use hormone replacement therapy, such as oral, say estrogen versus transdermal. Transdermal is more like creams or patches or things like that. And also really understanding the why of why you may have developed a blood clot plays into that. So that is, again, that's a very risk versus benefits, a very informed conversation with the prescribing physician to determine as a candidate. Active history of stroke, active or history of stroke is also listed as contraindications. But overall, the overall safety of bioidentical hormones is there. And it's something, at least at some level, that can be considered for most women. And I'll say that most, not all. Again, it's a very individualized assessment and recommendation. Now, there are some non-hormonal treatments that some people can consider. If one, you're determined to definitely not truly be a candidate for whatever reason, maybe it's one of those contraindications that I just listed or something else. Yoza is a medication that has been approved by the FDA as a non-hormonal treatment for hot flashes. So that can be prescribed if for some reason someone truly has a contraindication to estrogen-based replacement. Natural supplements, black cohosh, shade tree extract, maca root, even primrose oil, and there's a long list of these. Like the black cohosh, for example, is something that's been used for centuries by Native Americans to treat things like hot flashes. Maca root, it could be for libido, even primrose oil, hot flashes. And what's important to know is I feel like a lot of those things are often adjunctive. If you have mild symptoms or moderate symptoms and it keeps things in control and you have a reason not to be on hormones, it's definitely a good option. But I think what's important for us to always understand is that nothing actually replaces your hormones. This is symptom relief when we talk about these type of supplements. Vitamin supplements also, again, just, magnesium, for example, could help if you have sleep problems. Oftentimes relaxing and helping you, stay asleep. Our vitamin D for bone health, B vitamins for hair, nails. So vitamin supplements oftentimes can just help. Again, we're talking about symptoms, general health. And DIM, that helps with, that's another supplement that you can use that sometimes helps with estrogen metabolism. And so, and this list is a very short list of a lot of adjunctive things that are out there as options for women. What's also important is our lifestyle, right? Again, it's like any other thing when we talk about healthcare, medicine, medical issues, medicines or supplements alone are not it. I built my practice, Path Health, actually stated on a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, one of the principles of what we need to do is every day in our lifestyles to optimize our hormone, our balance, our gut, inflammation, things like that. And so I want to get into what that means. It's supporting this transitional time in our lives with lifestyle medicine and wellness. So
Dr. Herbert,
yeah.
Really quickly, you kind of sound like you are going in and out a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why. Let me check.
Okay.
Is that any better? I'm just talking to see if it sounds any different.
Yes.
A little better. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Mhm.
I apologize about that. So what I want to get into, like I said, when we're on any type of journey, like I said, medicines alone are never going to give you that optimal outcome, whether it's hormones, medical weight loss, or any other thing that you're trying to tackle with healthcare. And so the lifestyle medicine has 6 pillars. I want to go through those and understand why they're important in our overall health. And so I'm just going to go ahead and define them. And starting with nutrition, the WFPB that you see stands for whole food plant-based. That does not mean that you have to be vegan or vegetarian, but it is starting to try to shift the percentage of things that you see on your plate to being whole foods and plant-based options. So that's one. Physical activity is pillar number 2. Restorative sleep, number 3. I'm like, and there will be a quiz at the end. I'm just kidding. Stress management, substance use, and your social connections. So getting into that, how we look at nutrition. So there's a lot of science that supports that whole food and predominantly plant-based diet is important in preventing chronic disease, and changing this area of your life, we say can decrease, we call all-cause mortality. That means any way that you can die is going to decrease that by anywhere from 20 to 30. It depends on, how drastic, but making changes in diet can really decrease risk of mortality for all causes, cardiovascular, stroke, dementia, all of it. And when we talk about plant-based, you see some examples that I have here. We're talking about fruits, vegetables, whole grain. Kind of think of the Mediterranean diet. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Mediterranean diet, where you have your lean meats, your healthy fats like nuts and seeds, lots of vegetables, as kind of like an example. So if you ever wanted to even do this on your own, just Google Mediterranean diet, find something that you like, and start making some shifts in that direction. The next one is activity. So the recommendation for activity, a lot of us get the recommendation of, get X amount of steps in. And so you can read here on the slide, overall, I'll kind of look at the moderate intensity, 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous, intense activity. And the reason why I say that there is because that's where I'm going to put resistance training in that category, more so than what we consider as moderate. Because as we get into our perimenopause and menopause years, if you haven't already developed this as a habit, resistance training coupled with good protein intake are so key for our bone health as well as our metabolic health. And so I like to, so if you think of if you were just getting into the gym for some good resistance training, where you really can't talk very well through that workout, lifting heavy, you get 30, 45 minutes of those in a week, you're meeting a lot of criteria for something that can pull down your risk of disease by a pretty significant amount. Sleep. I think we underestimate the power of sleep. We talk about restorative sleep. A lot of us are existing on 4.5, 5, maybe 6 hours, but the recommendation is that we actually get 7 to 9 hours of sleep for optimal health. Can you, this is a question I like to ask. If you guys want to throw this in the chat, on average, how many hours of sleep are you getting per night?
Yeah, I want to hear this too, because
I
it
know
just
what
can't be
I know
me.
what I hear at the clinic, and it's not good. We don't want those I'll sleep when I die types.
Exactly. Okay, 6 hours, maybe 5, 6, 7 hours, 6 again, 7, 3 to 4, 3 to 4.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm taking magnesium, so 7, 5 to 6, 5 to 6, about 6. So it seems like it's between the 5 to like 6.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean? Like we normalize that.
Yeah.
And so we have to think about our sleep hygiene and the small things that we can change in order to start moving that. So if you're at this, even if in the 6, and sometimes more so than the quantity of sleep, even though we can have this, the quality of sleep is equally as important, right?
Mhm.
Want to be able to say, so there might be someone who has that 6 hours of sleep, but they feel rested, right? Where someone else
Mhm.
has that same 6 hours, been tossing and turning up, peeing all night, or whatever the case may be, the night sweats, the hot flashes are waking you up, and you're not getting that sleep. But the day is going to be the day. Work is going to be work. The
Yes.
kids, like none of that changes. So what can we do to change this part? So sleep.
Mercedes said I do the IV drip. That helps with my 7 hours.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anything particular in that IV drip that you would attribute to improve sleep?
There is magnesium in it, and it's B12,
Mm-hmm.
all kind of B vitamins in it. So
Yep.
I do that once a month. And there's C vitamin, there's D vitamin. So I have it scheduled and I pay for it with my FSA.
Okay. We need to come.
Nice.
We
Very
we
nice.
we give some of that
So,
if you got to come our way.
yes.
All
I
right.
have not felt rested in quite a while. Six maybe have been waking up a lot during the night lately. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Really underestimated. Now, and we tell ourselves we're going to catch up, right? On the weekend or something else, but it ends up turning into like chronic sleep deprivation. And what that can, I'm going to kind of go into this a little bit more. This affects your cortisol levels, right? Your stress. And this can be something that will thwart other efforts, right? So you can be trying to eat right, you can be getting into the gym, but if you're not restoring that with sleep, you're going to see weight gain because the cortisol levels are up. So again, we don't want to underestimate the importance of sleep because you could be hitting all those other pillars. If this one's not in there, it could be a lot of wasted effort when it comes to that. So just really keep that in mind on why that's so important to address.
Oh, Shonda says she takes L-9 drops in the evening. Maybe I'm saying that's wrong. Maybe I'm
I
saying it wrong.
the chat.
L-theanine.
L-theanine. Okay. Thank
And,
you.
and that's in some
Drops.
supplements and drops. Yeah, so
Okay.
different magnesiums, melatonin sometimes can help. And sometimes, again, it's just sleep hygiene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting off our screens a little bit earlier, actually having a set sleep time and wake time where you almost can calculate, I want 8 hours, so I need to go to bed here, I need to wake up here, right? So you're allowing a little bit of a wiggle, shutting things down, making sure that your bedroom is a place of rest is another one, right? When I say that, it's like, is there a TV on? How far away is your phone? Not if you do get up, not necessarily looking and checking what time it is, because then you start getting sleep anxiety, right? Oh, now I got 3 more hours to get some sleep. And then that's in your mind, your brain turns right back on and you can't go back to sleep. So there's a lot of, blackout curtains. There's so many different things that can play into sleep hygiene. But I just don't want to underscore how important it can be versus these other things. The next one, I've already moved the slide, is stress. Again, I think us, especially as Black women, we normalize a lot of things. And I don't think we realize the trauma and stress that our bodies absorb. But like I said, a little bit is okay, but in excess, we're going into anxiety, depression, obesity, immune dysfunction. So having some good coping mechanisms for stress reduction is going to be very important in overall health. And again, any of these pillars, improving, the science shows that even improving just 2 of these pillars very intentionally, again, reduces all-cause mortality. The next one is substance. When it comes to tobacco use, I usually say, because a lot of people in my generation don't smoke, some do. I'd say if you didn't start, don't start. If you don't start. This is not the time to pick up cigarettes or vaping or anything like that. But if it is something to do, having mechanisms for decreasing and ultimately stopping smoking is going to be key. Drinking, the recommendation hasn't gone as far as saying cut it all the way out. But for women, it's literally like they're saying like 1 pour in a sitting. And so that is like 1.5 ounces of like a spirit or a liquor or a glass of wine. Oftentimes we attach things like wine to our bedtime routines and, 1, 2 glasses socially, or maybe, you can save it for the weekend, but it is something to be mindful of because it can be definitely a contributing factor to some cancers, including breast cancer. And so, but if it's actually like a problem when we're talking about more abuse, and you need to be able to identify that and get the help that is required to try to abate that. And then social. I have it highlighted here. The single most important predictor of human happiness and long life is our social interactions, to make sure that you're supported, your relationships, that's, you know, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health. And some things, I put some bullet points here on things that you can do just on day-to-day life to increase strong social connections, taking more care to connect with people that you see a lot during the week, staying positive when connecting with others, sharing your experiences, being very intentional about making and spending time with others, and just being there for a friend and those who need you, and staying flexible and supportive about what others are doing in their lives. Sometimes we hide behind our social media and things like that, and just to be a little bit more intentional about that. And these are all, you know, habits. And so the one thing I do like to highlight when we talk about lifestyle medicine, I never, when I introduce these pillars, expect anyone to do some big overhaul of their lives, right? We want to always talk about SMART goals, making it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. I'll just give a couple of quick examples. Say like nutrition, you want to increase your protein. So you could say, I'm going to eat, you know, 25 grams of protein in my breakfast for the next, 20 days, because I want to increase my strength. And so you've not said, I'm about to eat 1,000 grams of proteins for the rest of the year, right? You make it small, measurable, so that you can keep habit stacking and slowly improve things. You want to increase water intake. Say like you're someone who barely gets 16 ounces down in a day, just say, I'm going to drink 20 ounces for the next 5 days. And then after that, I'm going to take it up to whatever. If it's something like getting into the gym, you know, that could be, I'm going to do 30 minutes of weight training 3 times a week for the next 28 days. If we're talking about sleep, a SMART goal could be something like, I'm going to stop using my devices 30 minutes before bedtime for the next 5 days, excluding weekends, you know, like those kind of things where you just give yourself one little thing to change in order to, get through just developing better habits overall. So that concludes that. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Ayesha.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Herbert, for giving us that great information. Of course, I do have additional questions that I do want to ask you, and I will. Yes, Sherry said great information. I definitely would agree. I do have one question for you that was asked
Okay.
in the chat. Do we need to ask our physician to check our cortisol?
It's not like necessary, because it can be something that changes and fluctuates. So a point in time, but if you definitely have, you have high stressors and things like that, it definitely could be something to be checked in order to get a starting point and a marker, so that when you implement changes in lifestyle or anything else, that you're able to kind of, check in on that on a subsequent visit. So it's not inappropriate, one, to ask for anything that you want, in my opinion, when it comes to your health. But it definitely is something that can be in what I consider a comprehensive wellness panel that would be very appropriate to ask your doctor.
Okay. So the questions that I have, right, there's a couple, of course, that I have. And again, you all chime in, raise your hand, or.
Oh, keep going.
No, you're fine. So I was going to say, you all can raise your hand and actually ask your question live, or you can put in the chat. But I'll start off. So we know menopause is still like a taboo topic in some circles. What can we do to normalize the conversation, especially in communities of color? Because especially, well, when you ask, like, is your mother's, right, like, talk to you about this? And maybe their mothers didn't talk to them about it, right? So what can we do to normalize that conversation, Dr. Herbert?
Yeah, so I definitely feel like it still is somewhat taboo, especially in our communities. Like I said, there's that suffering in silence. There's that normalizing of what's going on. You just got to push through it. I went through it, so you can go through it too. We still have people who are operating from misinformation, including the generation ahead of us. They're going to tell us what they know. They're going to be scared for us. So when we go start seeking this kind of care, they're going to probably project their own fears, as well as any shame onto us. So I think the first thing to release the taboo is to find communities such as things like this, recognizing that you're not alone. There are a few Facebook communities that, I join them because I like to see what the conversations are among women. There's a couple there for Black women to see, one, not even what we're telling each other, because I get in there and make sure I'm correcting misinformation, I'll get in there like, it doesn't, no, because
Yes.
that's how it goes. It could be a wildfire. So but I would say like Facebook communities are good. And just even get with your girlfriends, like, if you do book clubs or anything like that, there's a lot of good information out there where you can just tackle a chapter or two and really start, debunking the myths that are associated with, hormone, and really trying to get that education. So as you get the education, spread it. Just tell a friend if you're in organizations such as, sororities, any type of, community organizations, to even put on small events where it's part of the conversation.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question, Dr. Wilburn asked, did we talk about HRT? Is it linked to breast cancer?
So
Hormone replacement therapy, right? Yep, we did talk about it.
So far as the link to breast cancer, that is one of the largest misinformation pieces that came out of the WHI study. So the answer is essentially no. A book that I recommend, that I highly recommend for people to read, and again, this is personal for me. My mother passed of stage 4 breast cancer when I was 30 years old. We kind of talked about that a little bit in the introduction. And if you look at the timing of my age versus when I was given the same misinformation, I avoided hormones like they were the plague, including anything that could have helped me when I was dealing with fibroids and crazy periods. And then, so it wasn't until I chose to re-educate myself. And that's what I encourage so many other people to do, is to re-educate yourself from the misinformation. What happened in that study is, one, they were using synthetic estrogens. So that's, conjugated equine estrogen. They actually found that the estrogen only arm actually had a decreased risk of cancer. It's when they added on a synthetic progestin, okay, which is different than progesterone, which we consider the bioidentical, which would be probably prescribed to you today. And that's where they saw this increase, but they over exaggerated the result of what that increase actually was. And that's part of the problem of how that was presented. And then that was the headline. And that's when things just came to this screeching halt. So to answer your question, no, it is not a risk in that sense. And a lot of people have hesitancy as well if they have a first degree relative or a relative that has or had breast cancer as a concern. Now, if you have an estrogen sensitive breast cancer, then that's a different conversation. But, before you start hormone therapy, usually there's going to be a requirement that you've had up-to-date mammograms, or you're signing a waiver, one of the two. So you still are going to have that type of workup of information before starting hormone therapy, knowing that you're having normal mammograms. So again, it's really always assessing your individual risk. Okay, there's no blanket to that, but to answer the question, no. And book recommendation to dive deep and get that real, literature research, randomized controlled studies and all that, is the book called Estrogen Matters. I would encourage, just get on audiobook, roll around with it. If you're one who wants to hold a book in your hand, that is a recommendation that I would make to dive deeper into that subject.
Thank you so much. Someone else had the question, how safe are hormone pellets?
So there's mixed information about hormone pellets. I personally just placed some pellets on a client today. And so I feel, again, it's very individual. The reasons why someone will choose them or not choose them. People who are against them are because they feel like it gives what's called a super physiological dose, and that you can't really control it once they're in, you can't take them out. I would personally not necessarily start someone on pellets. I would try a different modality. The reasons why sometimes people want pellets is because of convenience. For women, you have them placed, you have a ramp up period, then you have a nice steady state period for about 3 months or so before you kind of re-up. And then that's the maintenance, and it's easy. You get your labs rechecked to make sure an appropriate dose and appropriate range. You feel great. But if the levels go a little bit too high, you just have increased risks of some of the side effects. But again, those are still rare. So again, I think it's a personal opinion. Do I personally think it's unsafe? No. Is it FDA approved? Also a no. So you just have to have, again, informed consent of risk and benefits, and decide if it's the right thing for you as an individual versus other modalities of hormone replacement therapy.
I have actually been trying them for the last 7 months.
Mhm.
And I've had minimum, other than acne, I really
Mhm.
haven't had any problem with them. But I
Mhm.
had my doctor to test my testosterone and it was 0. So they have it's really worked for me and
Mhm.
it changed my mood. I get to sleep better.
Mhm.
But I just wanted to hear how safe you thought they were because I do have to have a regular mammogram. She requires a whole lot. But
Yeah.
they have really helped me a lot. I don't have the night sweats and the hot flashes anymore.
Yeah, so a lot of times I put estrogen pellet, they can put testosterone pellet, in like it goes into the subcutaneous tissue and it's just slowly releasing some amount of hormone, throughout the affected period. And then when you kind of feel your symptoms dropping back off again is when you need to, and you'll figure out your timing if it's something that you do over the long term. And like I said, there's some people who tried other modalities and it just didn't work for them and they tried the pellets and there's some people who hate them, so again, I think it's a very individual thing and a decision that you should make carefully with your doctor. The one
Thank
thing I
you.
will say about pellets, the last thing is if
Hmm.
that's the only thing that a doctor is offering you, that's usually where the red flag is. You should know all your options.
Thank you so much.
Good advice. Yeah. Is it normal to go without a cycle for 2 years and then all of a sudden to start spotting for 2 to 3 days?
No. The answer to that, the simple answer is no. If you have not, and I'm just assuming, no other things going on. Overall, if someone says that they have had, and I don't know how old the person asking the question is, but again, we made a definition earlier in the presentation. Menopause is when you have not had a cycle for 12 months. And at that point, you are considered postmenopausal. If you're talking about 2 years, we definitely can call that postmenopausal. So any bleeding after in the postmenopausal state is called postmenopausal bleeding, and it requires a workup. If, like I said, if that was not induced by hormones, sometimes if someone has, just started hormone replacement therapy, because now you're reintroducing hormones, you have a little, you still have tissue and, uterine lining, and you might get some bleeding that could be monitored over a few months, but it persists. But the workup usually is getting an ultrasound because it's going to look at your uterus, it's going to look at your what's called your endometrial lining for its thickness. And then from there, a gynecologist often will recommend a endometrial biopsy. And basically the exclusion that you want to make is making sure you're excluding any type of cancer. So all postmenopausal bleeding needs to have a workup, period, point blank.
Great advice. I've had some comments. Tiffany said, I have been told I do not qualify for HRT, estrogen pellets, etc., due to my family's history of cancers. Dr. Wilburn said, I heard a doctor say if you're early and pre-menopause, birth control pills may help. Do you agree?
Yes. If you're already on birth control, like some people have progestin IUDs, so Mirena, there's no reason to take that out if it's working for you. And now I'll say this, hormone replacement therapy is not birth control. You can still get pregnant on HRT. You would need another type of protection, man get a vasectomy, that's a good one. Barrier protection, things like that. But there's no reason to discontinue I'm trying to say oral contraceptives if you're already on them and they're working for you, because actually that has more hormones, even though a lot of them are synthetic, than the amount of hormones that are in hormone replacement therapy. So if your body can handle that and you're doing fine with it, there's not necessarily a reason to discontinue it. Oftentimes people will maintain things like IUDs until about the age of anywhere from 52 to 53, depending on, when it was placed. But you can, sometimes that can manage symptoms in the perimenopausal period. And there's not a reason to discontinue unless it's working for you.
Great. Star said, I am a stroke survivor and I can't take estrogen due to my clot. What's your suggestion?
So that would be a very careful question. So depending on what your symptoms are, local estrogens do not cross into any high level systemically. So if you're having, the genital urinary symptoms, that tends to be pretty safe. A lot of the things that go with those recommendations are due to what we call the first pass effect of the liver that creates certain metabolites that put you at risk for, developing clots and things like that. There's mixed literature on that. Some people will say can transdermal that doesn't go through that, first pass to the liver, doesn't create the metabolites that put people at increased risk for clot development? Is that a safe option at very low doses? That will definitely be a conversation to have with your provider to assess your individual risk. But right now, it would be listed technically as, a contraindication. So if it's avoiding estrogens, other options can be, depending again on symptoms, sometimes testosterone, because some testosterone will convert a little bit into estrogen, just as it does normally in the body, that could potentially give you a little bit of relief. And there's still, like I said, good effects with progesterone and what it does for you. So again, it's a very individualized decision with that. Definitely heavy on what we call informed consent, where you understand the potential risk and benefits of that. But yeah. So again, I would just say the modality could be, what can be talked about, but the thing is the literature is still evolving. The amount of money they invested in the WHI study, that's probably never going to happen again, where they had the amount of women in that study to kind of get that level of information. So a lot of people practice differently, because some people have been doing this for 25 years. They're very comfortable prescribing. They don't see certain outcomes. So they kind of, not only say buck the system, right? But they have these careful conversations with their clients. They feel comfortable prescribing. Client says it's worth it versus the severity of symptoms to try, and they accept certain risks. Does that make sense? But right now, like I said, it is listed as a contraindication on the estrogen.
Fantastic. Tiffany said, what do you think? Well, her question is, what do you think about over-the-counter, is it progesterone creams?
If we're talking about, first of all, I'm not familiar with over-the-counter, but the protective mechanism when we're talking about opposing estrogen is through oral only. So progesterone, anyone who's prescribing a cream, that's not going to get into your systemic system enough to offer the protective effects that it needs to offer for your uterus. So in the hormone replacement realm, if you're taking an estrogen, you need to be taking an oral progesterone.
Gotcha. And Shamir said, GnRH meds for endometriosis. Can you speak to that? How will I know when I'm actually in menopause if I take a GnRH? Everything has stopped, of course, because of the medication.
What other tests are you having done? Usually they're going to check your FSH in order to determine that. As I was saying, that's a signal coming from the brain to the ovaries. And so if the ovaries are no longer producing estrogen, it's not giving that feedback loop. FSH keeps climbing, trying to tell the ovaries what to do louder and louder until they realize it's not happening. So oftentimes an FSH level can help you determine where things are.
Great. Okay. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I do have another one for you. What are some warning signs that shouldn't be ignored? Ignored symptoms that signal it's time to see a doctor immediately?
Well, in this time period, like I said, one person brought up like the post-menopausal bleeding or any type of really abnormal bleeding that's just, out of proportion, that doesn't need to be ignored. Heavy bleeding, even if you have a baseline of, fibroids, other things, it can lead to anemia, a lot of other problems. So I wouldn't normalize that. And that can be mitigated as well. Anything that's like a rapid memory loss. Yes, we have brain fog and concentration, but anything that's a more rapid decline in cognitive function would be something that I would say should not just be like, oh, that's just, perimenopause. I would not brush something like that off. When we talk about the mental health, we're talking about severe depression, severe anxiety, where it's really affecting your functioning. Obviously, if it's so bad that we're having thoughts of hurting ourselves or any suicidal ideation, would be a red flag of something not to ignore, and again, not to brush off into just being perimenopause. And I want to make sure that, when we have this new information, we have all these symptoms, we also have to exclude other things, right? when we're going through stuff. And if we land back at perimenopause, great, but you never want to just brush it all off to just being in perimenopause either. There's a balance between those things. Severe fatigue, I would say, again, we might be more tired than normal, but that could indicate other things like severe iron deficiency, anemia, other endocrine things that could be off with thyroid. So I would just say if things are, on the spectrum and they're very severe, don't just chalk it up and just say everything's perimenopause. And sometimes that's a joke with any times that someone says something, I was like, oh, you're in perimenopause. But, these are things I would say anything that's kind of leaning on the extreme on a spectrum will be a reason to make sure you bring it up to your doctor. But I also feel that perimenopause or menopause also needs to be on that same list when in consideration of symptoms.
That is great information. And when you talked about checking, like even with fatigue, I was having issues, well, I still do, with sleeping. And so my doctor actually did blood work to check my iron, like you said, and it was fine, but still that was one of the things. She's like, well, let's check, to make sure that's okay. So you're absolutely correct about other things that it could be. So many women feel dismissed, are unheard by providers. What advice would you give on how to advocate for yourself in the doctor's office?
So I'll definitely say things like this: get educated, be educated, and don't allow yourself to be gaslit. I do not blame doctors for their lack of knowledge. Again, we were not educated, we were not taught. But if you recognize that because you've taken the time to educate yourself and advocate for yourself, prepare. That's one thing I would say. Prepare with your symptoms, prepare with your request, which may not always be honored. Like you said, if it is dismissed, then you need to find another provider. This is your life. This is your health. It's not waiting for the next slot that you can't get for another 3 to 6 months anywhere, or your next annual, because so many things can happen, not only to your benefit in a time that passes, but also, like I said, in the protective things that you can get started, and unearthing and answering unknown questions about your health. So overall, I would just say, be prepared, have your questions, understand what you want and why you want it. A good log of the symptoms or things that you're experiencing. So really you can't, it'll be hard to, I can say this as a physician, it will be hard to ignore that and dismiss that. But if someone you don't know what you don't know. I don't know if you've heard that saying before. If someone's not educated on that, or they are locked into their misinformation, and they're just gonna if they're gonna tell you hormones are gonna cause cancer, or they're dangerous, or no, there is a very closed mind there. And it's not worth your health to stay in that situation. So there are resources. Some people register with the Menopause Society, for example, as people who are taking their certification, or just become a member just for visibility, and that they align with the principles of what you're seeking. But I just say, if you get educated, what you know your body, yourself, find someone who will listen and who can offer that at least as a consideration.
Great. That is great advice, because sometimes we don't always advocate for ourselves, especially if you feel rushed. Because I've been to see a doctor before, and I kind of felt like the whole appointment was being rushed, right? And so I didn't ask my questions.
Yeah, you have 15, they're literally 15 to 20 minute slots.
Yes. I'm good for those sending messages after the fact, though. So.
And oftentimes, and here's another thing that happens too, is, you see the doctor first, then some labs get ordered. Hopefully it's advocated for. You get it on your eye chart, everything's green, right? It's normal, but you don't feel normal, right? And so no one's calling you about those labs. No one's saying it's normal, but it was on the low end of normal, right? Or normal, but it was on the high end of this thing, or, depending on whatever direction optimal is, right? Optimal, 1/10 of a point later, you're gonna be in the red. And no one's doing anything to prevent you from tipping over into the red. And I'm talking about metabolic things. Think about a hemoglobin that is 5.6, right? But 5 higher, you're pre-diabetic, but no one's telling you to make any lifestyle change or do anything. And then here you come next year for your annual, normal, and now you're in this other metabolic state and never had a chance to be proactive or do anything about it. So
good. And okay, so to close this out, Dr. Herbert, if you could leave our audience with one powerful takeaway about this stage of life, what would it be?
I would think the one thing is just knowing that you do not have to suffer, period, and that there are people who want to help you, to speak up about it, and always advocate, educate. That's why I say we are not that generation anymore. We are the generation that is going to make a difference for ourselves and the young women coming behind us. This is no longer going to be a problem, period.
Absolutely. And so, ladies, just to let you know, well, first and foremost, thank you again, Dr. Herbert, for your time, your wisdom, and your encouragement tonight. People had great questions. You gave phenomenal information. Got stuff in the chat where people said it was a really good webinar, things they needed to hear, things they wanted to know. So thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who joined us. It takes courage to show up for your health and your healing. And if you find value in this conversation, please share it with others who need to hear it. Let's keep the conversation going on social media with our friends. And I'm going to have my own little quote as well. This stage of life doesn't have to be suffered through. Like you said, it can be owned, understood, and even celebrated. So the one thing too, Dr. Herbert, I want you to do is to give these lovely ladies your information, what you have to offer, and how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, so I have the slide up and I'll put it in the chat after I stop sharing my screen. But you know, on Instagram, Path Health, and then my personal page is a lot of the same thing. It's at Dr. MD. This is our email and website. And I also offer free 15-minute discovery calls. So I'm going to put that QR code up here. And when I get back in the chat, if I can do it quickly, I'll try to put just the link. But if you're able to scan this code, it's limited spots. But if you can grab one, mainly this month because I'm going on vacation, but I'll open up some more spots. And again, you can bring your questions to this 15 minutes. And obviously you can see it. And this is for you don't have to be in Atlanta, my license right now, or Georgia and Texas. You don't have to be in Atlanta to take a discovery call. I am happy to talk to you, even if it helps you advocate for yourself where you are. And if you are in Georgia, and again, I'm licensed as well in Texas and looking to expand some of my licensing, then we can talk about obviously my practice and if it's a fit for, any of your needs moving forward into, like I said, full consultation in any of our packages that we offer for hormone balance. And as well, like I said, we do medical weight loss. Someone mentioned IVIM therapy. We do offer that in the practice as well. But in terms of the discovery call itself, especially for the subject that we discussed today, I'm, happy to take this call and, like I said, educate and advocate.
Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully you ladies will be reaching out to Dr. Herbert as well. So before we close, here's some quick reminders. The recording of tonight's session will be on my YouTube channel, The True Human Resource LLC, and a link will be sent to you via email. And I'll also put the link in the chat too, just in case. And resources and key takeaways will also be shared for your reference. I will also share Dr. Herbert's information with you. So you'll have that. I know she gave it on here, but I want you to have it too when I email you. And again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me, ask them, and I can try to get those answered for you. Again, thank you all so much for taking time out tonight on a Wednesday to come and get this very, very important information and to be a part of this conversation, which I think, of course, is very important. So thank you all so very much, Dr. Herbert. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome, phenomenal job.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you, Sorbai. But thank you again. And you all have a wonderful night and keep powering through the pause. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.